It's week 17 of the NFL season, and here are my predictions for this week. But first, how did I do last week in my predictions? In week 16, I went 9-7, and before getting into the video, I want to say Merry Christmas to everyone watching, and Happy Holidays. So kicking off the week on Wednesday, Christmas Day, we had the 14-1 Chiefs versus the 10-5 Steelers. The Chiefs are coming off a 27-19 win against the Texans. In that game, Patrick Mahomes went 28-41, 260 yards and a touchdown, while also having 33 yards rushing and a touchdown. Then Kareem Hunt had 55 yards rushing and a rushing touchdown, and Xavier Worthy had 7 receptions for 65 yards and a touchdown. Then for the Steelers, they're coming off a 34-17 loss to the Ravens. Russell Wilson went 22 of 33, 217 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. As a team, they combined for 24 carries and 117 yards rushing, and Calvin Austin III led them with 4 receptions and 65 yards. But this week, Chris Jones is questionable, and George Pickens is also questionable. This Chiefs offense hasn't been great all year long, and they've been carried by their defense. And if Chris Jones doesn't play this game, it's going to be a big hit to their defense. But this Steelers offense without George Pickens has not looked the same, and Russell Wilson has been struggling a lot without him. So I still have the Chiefs winning. Then we have the 10-5 Ravens versus the 9-6 Texans. In the Ravens win against the Steelers, Lamar Jackson went 15 of 23 with 207 yards, 3 touchdowns, and an interception. Then Derrick Henry had 162 yards rushing, and Zay Flowers had 5 receptions for 100 yards. Then in the Texans loss to the Chiefs, CJ Stroud went 23 of 39, 244 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. Joe Mixon had 57 yards rushing, and Tank Dell led them with 6 receptions, 98 yards, and a touchdown. But unfortunately, on that touchdown play, he dislocated his knee and tore his ACL and will be out for the rest of the season. And also in that game, Jimmy Ward got injured and will be out for the rest of the season, and he's getting foot surgery. The Texans still have Nico Collins and Dalton Schultz, but they're really going to have to focus on the run game for the rest of the season. But for the Ravens, Zay Flowers is questionable this week. But with how many injuries the Texans have, I have the Ravens winning. Then moving over to Thursday, the 8-7 Seahawks versus the 4-11 Bears. The Seahawks are coming off a 27-24 loss to the Vikings, and they're up 24-20 late in this game, but Sam Darnold found Justin Jefferson for a 39-yard touchdown with 3 minutes and 51 seconds left in the game to take the lead 27-24. Geno Smith in that game was 31 of 43, 314 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. Then Kenneth Walker only had 8 carries for 31 yards, and Jackson Smith and Jigba had 8 receptions, 95 yards, and a touchdown. Then for the Bears, they're coming off a 34-17 loss against the Lions, and Caleb Williams played very good in this game, having 334 yards and 2 touchdowns, and led the team with 34 yards rushing. Then Keenan Allen had 9 receptions for 141 yards and a touchdown. Entering this game, Kenneth Walker is questionable for the Seahawks, and Caleb Williams has been playing pretty good this season. He's up to 3,200 yards, 19 touchdowns, and 5 interceptions, and he hasn't thrown an interception in 9 straight games, but they have also lost their last 9 games. But this Bears team still needs a lot of development, and I still have the Seahawks winning. Then moving over to Saturday, the 9-6 Chargers versus the 3-12 Patriots. The Chargers are coming off a 34-27 win against the Broncos on Thursday Night Football, and this was a very good back and forth game. And going into halftime, we saw the very rare free kick where the Chargers called a fair catch on a punt with zeros on the clock at the end of the half, so they got to attempt a 57-yard field goal with no blockers, and that was the first time it happened in 48 years. But towards the end of the third quarter, things flipped for the Chargers, and they were able to score a touchdown with 2:58 left in the third. Then they went on to score 2 more touchdowns in the fourth quarter, but the Broncos were able to hit a 55-yard field goal with 57 seconds left in the fourth, but they just couldn't get the ball back, so the Chargers won. But in the game, Justin Herbert played pretty well, going 23 of 31, 284 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. Then Gus Edwards had 68 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns, and Ladd McConkey had 6 receptions for 87 yards. Then for the Patriots, they're coming off a 24-21 loss against the Bills. Drake May went 22 of 36, 261 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. Ramondre Stevenson had 60 yards rushing and a touchdown, and Kayshon Boutte had 5 receptions, 95 yards, and a touchdown. And I have the Chargers winning this game. Then the 9-6 Broncos versus the 7-8 Bengals. In the Broncos loss against against the Chargers. Bo Nix went 29 of 40, 263 yards and 2 touchdowns. Audric Estime had 48 yards rushing and a touchdown, and Marvin Mims Jr. had 3 receptions for 62 yards. Then for the Bengals, they're coming off a 24-6 win against the Browns, and they're still alive in the playoffs, but they would need to win out, and they would need the Broncos or Chargers to lose out. But in that game against the Browns, Joe Burrow went 23 of 30, 252 yards and 3 touchdowns. Then Chase Brown had 91 yards rushing, and Jamar Chase led them with 6 receptions, 97 yards and a touchdown. And on defense, they had 5 sacks and 2 interceptions. The Bengals have now won 3 games in a row, and Joe Burrow's playing at an MVP level, and I think this is going to be a very close game. But with the way Joe Burrow's been playing lately, I have the Bengals winning. Then the 7-8 Cardinals versus the 9-6 Rams. The Cardinals are coming off a 36-30 loss against the Panthers, and they are officially eliminated from the playoffs. In that game, Kyler Murray went 20 of 32, 202 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. Then James Conner had 117 yards rushing and a touchdown, and James Conner also led them with 4 receptions and 49 yards receiving. But he is questionable this week. Then for the Rams, they're coming off a 19-9 win against the Jets. Matt Stafford went 14 of 19 with 110 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. Then Kyron Williams had 122 yards rushing and a touchdown. And Puka Nacua led them with 8 receptions and 56 yards. They have won 8 out of their last 10 and are one of the hottest teams in the NFL. So I have the Rams winning. Then the 4-11 Jets versus the 12-3 Bills. In the Jets' loss against the Rams, Aaron Rodgers went 28 of 42, 256 yards and a touchdown. Breece Hall had 52 yards rushing and 5 receptions for 38 yards. Then Devontae Adams led them with 7 receptions, 68 yards and a touchdown. Then for the Bills, in their win against the Patriots, Josh Allen went 16 of 29 with 154 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. And James Cook had 11 carries for 100 yards and a touchdown, and led the team with 3 receptions, 26 yards and a touchdown. But entering this week, Josh Allen is questionable with an elbow injury, but I still have the Bills winning. Then the 3-12 Titans versus the 3-12 Jaguars. The Titans are coming off a 38-30 loss against the Colts, and they had a late comeback in this game. In the third quarter, they were down 38-7, and they would go on to score 3 straight touchdowns to cut it to an 8-point deficit, but Mason Rudolph ended up throwing an interception on their last drive. In the game, Mason Rudolph had 252 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions. Tajay Spears had 27 yards rushing and 2 rushing touchdowns. Then Chig Okonkwo led them with 9 receptions and 81 yards. Then for the Jaguars, they're coming off a 19-14 loss against the Raiders. Mac Jones went 25 of 39, 247 yards and a touchdown. Tank Bigsby led them with 50 yards rushing and a touchdown. Then Brian Thomas Jr. had 9 receptions, 132 yards and a touchdown, and now has over 1,000 yards on the season and 9 touchdowns. Both of these teams have been very bad this season, and the winner of this game is probably going to drop out of the top 5 picks, and is probably going to end up with around the 6th pick in the draft. In the Titans' last 2 games, they've put up 27 points, then last week they put up 30 points. Mason Rudolph's been playing pretty good, but has still thrown a lot of interceptions. But I think the Titans are going to win. Then the 4-11 Panthers versus the 8-7 Buccaneers. In the Panthers' win against the Cardinals, Bryce Young went 17 of 26, 158 yards and 2 touchdowns, while also having 68 yards rushing and a touchdown. And Chuba Hubbard had 152 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns. And Adam Thielen led them with 5 receptions, 43 yards and a touchdown. Then the Buccaneers are coming off a 26-24 loss against the Cowboys. Baker Mayfield went 31 of 43, 303 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. Bucky Irving had 68 yards rushing and a touchdown, and Mike Evans had 5 receptions for 69 yards. This is a rematch of Week 13, and the Buccaneers won that game 26-23 in overtime, so I expect this one to be very close as well. The Buccaneers are still fighting for a playoff spot, and with that loss, they have now fallen out of their division lead, and Atlanta took over. So this is a must-win game for the Bucs. But the Panthers have been playing a lot better lately after they unbenched Bryce Young. So I think there's going to be a lot of rushing yards in this game. The Panthers give up the most rushing yards per game at 175, and they're giving up the most points per game at just under 30. So I have the Buccaneers winning. Then we have the 3-12 Raiders versus the 5-10 Saints. In their Raiders win against the Jaguars, Aiden O'Connell went 24 of 38 with 257 yards. Amir Abdullah had 38 yards rushing and a touchdown, and Brock Bowers had 11 receptions for 99 yards. Then for the Saints, they got shut out 34-0 against the Packers on Monday Night Football, and that was the first shutout of the season. Spencer Rattler went 15 of 30 with 153 yards and an interception, and he led the team with 28 yards rushing. And they've just been struggling all year long, and especially right now with all the injuries they have. For this upcoming week, Derek Carr is questionable, and Alvin Kamara is also questionable. So I have the Raiders getting their second win in a row. Then the 7-8 Cowboys versus the 12-3 Eagles. The Cowboys are coming off a 26-24 win against the Buccaneers, and Cooper Rush played very well in this game, going 26 of 35 with 292 yards and a touchdown, and CeeDee Lamb led them with 7 receptions and 105 yards. Then the Eagles are coming off a 36-33 loss against the Commanders, and in this game, Jalen Hurts got a concussion early in the first quarter. Then Kenny Pickett came in and went 14 of 24 with 143 yards, a touchdown, and an interception, but Pickett also got injured in that game and is questionable this week. Then Saquon Barkley had 150 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns, and A.J. Brown led them with 8 receptions, 97 yards, and a touchdown, and now has over 1,000 yards on the season and 6 touchdowns. Last time these teams played each other, it was week 10, and the Eagles won 34-6, but with both Pickett and Hurts being questionable this week, the Eagles could potentially be starting Tanner McKee, a 6th-round pick from 2023 that has never played a game in the NFL, which could hurt this offense a lot, but they still have Saquon Barkley. And this season, the Cowboys are allowing the 5th most rushing yards per game at 136, so I don't think this one's going to be a blowout like it was in week 10, but I still think the Eagles are going to win. Then the 7-8 Colts versus the 2-13 Giants. In the Colts win against the Titans, Anthony Richardson went 7 of 11 with 131 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. Then Jonathan Taylor had a massive game with 218 yards and 3 touchdowns, and Josh Downs led them in receiving with 3 receptions, 61 yards, and a touchdown. Then the Giants are coming off a 34-7 loss against the Falcons. Drew Lock in that game went 22 of 39, 210 yards, a touchdown, and 2 interceptions, but he is questionable this week with a shoulder injury. Then also in that game, Malik Neighbors had 7 receptions for 68 yards. This season, the Giants are giving up the 2nd most rushing yards per game at 142, and with Jonathan Taylor coming off a 200-yard game, he should play very well in this one, so I have the Colts winning. Then the 7-8 Dolphins versus the 3-12 Browns. The Dolphins are coming off a 29-17 win against the 49ers. Tua in that game went 22 of 34, 215 yards and a touchdown. Then Devin Achane had a massive game with 120 yards rushing and a touchdown, and 6 receptions for 70 yards. Then in the Browns loss against the Bengals, Dorian Thompson-Robinson went 20 of 34 with 157 yards and 2 interceptions, and is questionable this week with a calf injury. So if he can't play, we could potentially see Bailey Zappi start for the Browns. Then also in that game, Jerome Ford had 92 yards rushing and a touchdown, and David Njoku had 8 receptions for 66 yards. But also David Njoku is questionable this week with a knee injury. The Browns offense has been very bad all season long, and with all the injuries piling up right now, I have the Dolphins winning. Then the 11-4 Packers versus the 13-2 Vikings. In the Packers shutout win against the Saints, Jordan Love went 16 of 28 with 182 yards and a touchdown. Josh Jacobs had 69 yards rushing and a touchdown, and Jaden Reed had 3 receptions for 76 yards. Then on defense, they had 3 sacks and an interception, while also holding the Saints to just 196 yards and no points. Then in the Vikings win against the Seahawks, Sam Darnold went 22 of 35, 246 yards and 3 touchdowns, and now has 3,700 yards, 32 touchdowns, and 11 interceptions. Then Aaron Jones had 67 yards rushing, and Justin Jefferson had 10 receptions for 144 yards and 2 touchdowns. The last time these teams played each other was back in week 4, where the Vikings won 31-29. But every season since 2020, these two teams have split the season series. But with that said, both of these teams are playing at a very high level right now, and the Vikings are still fighting for the #1 seed in the NFC. I think this is going to be a very close game, and it could be pretty high scoring as well, around 30 points each. And I have the Packers winning. Then we have the 8-7 Falcons versus the 10-5 Commanders. In the Falcons' blowout win against the Giants, Michael Penix Jr. in his debut went 18 of 27 with 202 yards and an interception. Bijan Robinson had 94 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns, and Darnell Mooney had 5 receptions for 82 yards. And their defense played amazing. As well, having 3 sacks and 2 interceptions, which both of them were pick sixes, and they held the Giants to just 234 yards. Then for the Commanders, in their win against the Eagles, Jaden Daniels went 24 of 39, 258 yards, 5 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions, while also leading the team with 81 yards rushing. Then Olamide Zaccheaus led them with 5 receptions, 70 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And with that win, they have now won 3 games in a row, but the Falcons have also won 2 games in a row, and now they lead their division. So it's a big game for both sides, since each team has not clinched the playoffs yet. And I have the Commanders winning. Then finally on Monday Night Football, the 13-2 Lions versus the 6-9 49ers. In the Lions' win against the Bears, Jared Goff went 23 of 32, 336 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Jahmyr Gibbs had 109 yards and a touchdown, and Jameson Williams led them in receiving with 5 receptions, 143 yards, and a touchdown. Then for the 49ers, in their loss against the Dolphins, Brock Purdy had 313 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception, and George Kittle led the team with 8 receptions and 106 yards. This 49ers team has been struggling all year long, but they have also been dealing with a lot of injuries this season. The Lions are currently the best team in the NFL, and I have them winning. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe. Goodbye.